Hello everyone, welcome back to MLS Moves. Please make sure you like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Before we get to the video, I'd like to thank you all for your support and remind you that we're doing a jersey giveaway when we hit 3,000 subscribers. 3,000 subscribers is our goal to reach by the end of this month, so make sure you subscribe, stay subscribed, follow me on Twitter at MLS Moves for the latest updates on the giveaway. Now, on to the video. FIFA ruled that every league is allowed to play regular season matches abroad now, and there is a very good chance that several leagues like La Liga, the Premier League, Serie A, and many more will start to play regular season matches in America because of the soccer fan bases that are here in the United States. Today, I brought on my friend Adam of USMNT Stan on Twitter to talk about what this will do for MLS and American soccer, get his perspective on Major League Soccer because he was a supporter or an avid fan of the Metro Stars back in the day, see what he thinks with the league today, and what MLS needs to do in his eyes to be taken seriously and take the next step before it's too late, especially with these leagues being able to play regular season matches in the United States now. All right, today, Adam at Stan, U.S. Men's National Team on Twitter, is joining me today to talk MLS, talk about the growth of the league. Also going to talk about the report that some other European leagues are going to start playing games in the United States. Adam, I'm glad to have you here, man. Welcome. How you doing?
Yeah, Will, appreciate you having me. It's funny, like I don't talk MLS very much, at least publicly. Like I have a couple friends who are into the league and kind of have some group chats with them, but it's hard to find, it's still a niche sport, right? Especially if you're not in a major metropolitan area. So I'm excited to talk about the league. I'm excited to talk about the positives, talk about some things where I think we both think the league maybe can grow and kind of, keep elevating, but thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is because I have followed your account and I noticed that you don't talk a lot of MLS. You're predominantly obviously national team account, talking about the US national team. And I just wanted to see what you thought about the league, kind of get a different perspective because obviously someone like you will be able to call balls and strikes, be honest about what's wrong with the league, how to improve it, especially when it comes to the national team, because that's what we all want to see, a better national team. And it starts with the domestic league. I mean, it obviously is important to have our best players in Europe playing against the best competition, but it's also good and important to have a good foundation at home to get some of these youth players opportunities to develop and obviously bear fruit for the national team.
Yeah, I think I've something I have said for a while, right? In regards to MLS, I've been kind of on this side of the block for at least 4 or 5 years. I remember, COVID time putting out a thread about it. And it's basically like I think for us to maximize what US soccer can be holistically, our domestic league is going to work very much in the same way that Brazil's domestic league works for them, right? Are we going to be
Mhm.
Brazil? Obviously not. People jump to conclusions sometimes. That's not what I'm saying, right? What I'm saying is for Brazil to maximize who they are, they need a domestic league that's very strong at player development, right? Finding the talent in their country, putting it into structured environments as early as possible, right? To kind of mix that Brazilian flair and kind of street to ball with developing them as players, holistic players. So to me, that's like us, right? Like we're going to be different than Brazil. We're not finding a bunch of kids playing on the street. We're going to find them in club soccer and, early youth, kind of pay for play, which is a whole different topic we don't have to go into. But we need to find those kids and get them into top academies. And so, first of all, let's give MLS kudos for this. The academy, the rise of the academy system, which is an MLS product, right? That does not happen if we don't have MLS clubs developing, growing, investing, right, economically into it. And at some point in time, I don't know exactly when, maybe even better, feels like a decade ago, a little more than a decade ago, some clubs really started to kind of like up the profile of their, academies and youth systems, right? FC Dallas,
Mhm.
probably the most predominant. Philly's done a great job, right? And it feels like everyone has said, wow, we should do that. Look how much they sold that player for. Look at the level of players they have coming into their senior team now from their academy. That's been such a cool development, and that's very Brazil-like, where the academy system is the main thing there, right? The academies of the big clubs developing players, selling players to big clubs in Europe, right? For big money, It helps the players develop, the young Brazilian players develop because they get to play in a really good league in Brazil when they're young. They get sold to wherever, right, after they're 18, and then
Mhm.
they play in the top leagues in the country, and then they play for the national team if they're good enough, right? It's almost the same structure for us. Play the young guys. We've seen MLS teams doing that for, I feel like, the last 5-6 years at a way higher clip, which is super exciting, and then sell them if they're good enough. And if they're not, then they keep playing for you. But so that's kind of where I see the league's role in the national team per se.
Well, we talked a little bit about this last night, and you had told me that you were a Metro Stars fan, not as much a Red Bulls fan. That's what you referenced them to. They obviously have a really good youth academy, produce several good players. Um, one of my favorite players they produce, which is kind of like a kind of controversial figure in the national team, was Matt Miazga, a player
Mhm.
that I thought had a lot of potential. He looked really good early on. Obviously, went to Chelsea and was just on a merry-go-round of loans, and he could never find his footing and truly develop into the player we thought he could.
Mhm.
But that's obviously your club. They're very good at developing youth talent. But if you look at them, Adam, from what they were, I don't know, a decade ago, they
Sure.
kind of bought the big names. They had Thierry Henry, Tim Cahill, Marquez, even though he was kind of a flop in MLS. And then they kind of shifted. They kind of went to a different approach. They, hired Jesse Marsh in 15, and then they started, really relying on the youth, their youth. So tell me about your fandom with the Red Bulls. What exactly, I guess, pulled you in, and what kind of sucked you out with the
So
team?
I grew up in Jersey, and I grew up, I don't know, half hour from the Meadowlands, right? So
Mhm.
what sucked me in is like, wow, domestic soccer, and it's in my backyard, basically, right? And you could go to Giant Stadium for $5. Like you could really. And I remember I got my license in 2000, and when you get your license, it's like, man, I'm going to go to Giant Stadium for a soccer game. I'm going to go to New York City. I'm going to go, and that's one of the things a couple buddies of mine would do, right? Who are into soccer, and we were all starting in that era. If people remember, that was the era pre 2002 World Cup where soccer was starting to kind of bubble and boil, right? You didn't really have Landon Donovan in 2000 yet, but you're coming off the 94 World Cup, with Ramos and Alexi and a lot of those guys. And it's like, it's a thing, the 98 World Cup was really disappointing for those of us who followed that 94 World Cup as young kids. I was like fourth grade or something for the 94 World Cup. And so 2000, it was kind of exciting, like we knew, if you're following the Metro Stars back then, Clint Mathis was like my guy. I thought he was going to be like a big time star for the national team. We were all in on him. And then you had that rise in 01 and 2002. You had that rise of Donovan and a couple other young guys to kind of mix in with the vets. So it was kind of a mixture. Like I'd say the USMNT has been my club team for most of my life, right? Like it's been the
Mhm.
thing I'm most passionate about when it comes to soccer. And the Metro Stars was kind of like, hey, there's this cool thing locally. That 2000 season was really, really fun as well. I mean, it's just like my memories of that team are, Mathis and with the two Colombians, Valencia, Ramos, Timmy Howard. I'm not sure if he played that year a lot, but Timmy Howard ended up playing a bunch. And, I was a goalie, so he was always my guy. And once again, you could get $5 tickets, and there was no security. You could walk all the way down and sit basically field side for $5. And it was like golden, but middle of summer, 100-degree days weren't the best. But we went to a lot of games those first couple kind of years that I had my driver's license, and it was really fun, man. And I actually was a pretty hardcore Metro Stars and Red Bull fan up to like the mid 2010s, late 2010s. But you kind of mentioned the Marsh era. I loved that era. I was really into those teams. Obviously, it's a fun style of play to watch. It's
Oh
exciting and
yeah.
based and good players, right? From Henri to Bradley Wright Phillips to, Tyler Adams came up, and that was really exciting as a national team fan. Like, hey, we have a future guy. So that was a fun era, man. And, we could talk about it a little bit, but it's like the direction they've gone post pandemic has just been, as a fan, it's just been bad. Like, went to a game a couple years ago, a lot of money, for me, a long trip now from Connecticut. I still love the Harrison Arena is awesome, but, just gosh, like, how much is it worth it to get down here for me in my life right now? Like,
Yeah.
pretty empty, pretty lifeless soccer. They're having an okay season this year, but I don't know, man. So that's kind of, I don't know, the history in full of me and the Metro Stars / Red Bulls.
Yeah. Well, So I've always had like a frustration with the Red Bulls specifically because we both know that the ownership group has ample of money. They could invest in
Correct.
whatever they wanted to. They used to do that. Obviously, Thierry Henry, one of the best players ever, and then Tim Cahill was, he's okay, but I mean, it was for the time, it was a really good signing for MLS.
Big.
And then they shift approaches like we talked about. When they had Marsh, they kind of were playing more like Moneyball. They were making more strategic signings. They weren't really signing big names. Sasha Kljestan and Bradley Wright Phillips were the two best players in the Marsh era, and they weren't household names by any stretch. Most people don't know who Sasha Kljestan was unless you're a national team fan
Right.
or you're following MLS. And I just kind of wondered, why were they taking that approach when Salzburg is constantly winning the league? Leipzig is obviously was competing, and they were spending a lot of money on the club and the Bundesliga and trying to compete with Bayern and Dortmund. And I was just really curious, like, why would you do this? Like, why would you not invest the money? You have a beautiful world-class stadium. You've been to it, obviously, like you said, it's a beautiful stadium. It is
Awesome.
probably one of the best stadiums, if not the best in MLS.
So
Great stadium, European like. And I just didn't understand what they were doing. And now I feel like they've kind of realized, hey, listen, we can't win anything. Our rival, New York City FC, beat us to winning an MLS Cup. They've only been in the league less than 10 years. We're going to have to spend. We're going to have to invest. You cannot win in this league, even though they do limit what you can do. We'll get to that later, about how we can improve that. But we're going to have to spend something. So they go
right.
out, they sign Emil Forsberg, who's a respectable player from their, parent club in Leipzig. And look at the difference, Adam. Like you said you don't pay attention to the club as much as you did at once, but the team is playing a lot better. If I'm not mistaken, they're second or third in the East right now.
Third, yep.
Yeah. So I think some of the fans have been burned, so they're kind of like skeptical. They're like, I'm not going all in. We'll see what happens. Because if you see that there's not the same energy, even though they're doing well, there's not a lot of energy behind the club like there has been in years past. So
Right.
I just, if they're willing to spend, how are they going to be able to get the average fan back in to support the club going forward?
Right. And that's the question. How do you get me back in? I'm a big soccer fan. Spent a lot of my time on soccer, but I've made like a very, if not intentional, very obvious decision to invest my soccer time. Right. When you hit 40, I'm 40, crazy enough. I have 3 kids. I can't, at 25, I could literally watch soccer all weekend. I could watch soccer all weekend on one TV. I could have basketball. I can't do that anymore. Like I have a certain amount of hours in my week that I can invest to sports holistically, right? To watch.
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to spend it on? And it's at a point where if the club was really exciting and just fun to watch and had great energy and a good investment behind it, it might be worthwhile, right? I spend most of my soccer watching time on one of two things. One, watching national team players play for really good clubs, like guys that are going to be really important. That's just fun to me. And two, watching really good games, watching Arsenal Tottenham the other day, right? Like watching high level soccer games that are the best players and best teams in the world, because that's really fun and entertaining, right? So where MLS, I think, has to like put itself is if you're going to be a little bit more like localized, right? Hey, we're going to be a fun local team for the people in this area to watch, right? And for our domestic audience to watch, then you've got to invest in your teams in a way that fans aren't going to get disenfranchised, because that's kind of what's happened. And I haven't been that public about it, but it's just every year I've lost a little interest. It's kind of like baseball. When I was a kid, I used to watch baseball all the time. I never watch baseball anymore. What's the why behind it? Like, I don't know. There was never a moment where I was like, I'm not watching baseball anymore. There was never a moment I was like, I'm watching less Red Bull this year. Like, it just kind of happened because it was like, I only have a certain amount of time. They kind of suck. They're kind of boring. Like I don't know. And does it make me not a diehard? Probably. That's fine. Like, kind of is what it kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's you made a really good point about the Forsberg signing. He's a good player, right? I mean, that is a national team player for a really good European nation. And that's the kind of signing, and that's the kind of thing that if you're especially in the market of New York, go do it, man. Like, you have soccer and soccer fans in this area. If you put a good team together, right? If they were able to do what Inter Miami did, it would be berserk. I mean, like it would. I know it's crazy anyway with what having Messi in the league, but having him in the New York market would have been wild. It just would have been out of this world in terms of the environment in that stadium. And I don't know, like, I'm not saying go get Messi. That's a one of a kind, right? But like go invest and like get some players here that we can kind of as a fan base go, yeah, I want to take my 3 kids, spend $500 and go take them to a game, you know?
Oh, exactly. And, I think that they did what they could do in the winter transfer window because it's obviously an awkward transfer window. I get so much flack for wanting us to change to a more European schedule because it would make so many more things easy, especially at the transfer window scheduling, national break, international breaks. That's a whole separate issue though. But they did what they could do because with the time they had, I expect the Red Bulls to be very active in the summer transfer window. Maybe even go for a Lewandowski. That would be a player that would get people excited and want to go to Harrison and watch him. Yeah, I bet that'd fire you up. I bet you'd be ready to go. I mean, at least once or twice, right? To go see one of the best strikers of all time playing it, for your team. But like, kind of like you were saying about the money thing, when you see Gillette Stadium hosting Messi, they open up the entire stadium. Normally, it's like 20,000 seats, if that. I don't even know if they have that many fans, to be honest with you. And then you see them pack the stadium, but the average ticket price is $285, $10 more than the Patriots tickets. I just think that soccer is so casual, MLS wise, in this country that that's just asking a lot for people to be paying almost $300 a ticket. For the true fans, people are going to that game like a concert. It's not like they're actual fans of the team. It's a one-time deal. It's over. They're not coming back. That's just how it is, right? How many? Like, I would be shocked if there was 100 people there that are like, you know what? I'm going to be a Rebs fan now after this game. I'm enlightened. I'm coming. I'm going to buy season tickets now because of this game. That's not going to happen, right? It's just a one-time thing to say you went and saw Messi and then it's over. It's That's the problem with the ticket prices. You're pricing people out. And now I'm not completely familiar with the European format with the tickets. I think it's more like a lottery system, so they can't price gouge people. I don't know if that's something that we would need to do in the future to make it. But you can't price people out because essentially you're pricing people out who would be your core audience to
Right.
help you grow. So I just think that the money has gotten too involved with it, and MLS is just not it's not at the place and point in its development to be able to do that. It's just not good enough to pay that. You can't be paying Premier League prices with this type of quality.
For sure, for sure. And I think as a league holistically, I think having a vision of like knowing who you are, right? Like
Mhm.
what are we right now? Okay, we're a worldwide, we're a second tier league, right? People will fight over that. Third, I don't know. It's not in the top tier, whatever that number of leagues, however you want to list it, right? If you want to say there's 8 above us, 14 above us, I don't really care. To me, it's this notch down, right? Which a lot of leagues are, right? The thing is, a lot of leagues that are second tier leagues in terms of talent have like rabid soccer culture and fan base, right? So like Brazil is a good example. Brazil's not a top 7 league in the world. I don't think it's probably right below that. I think it's better than MLS on the whole for sure. But like rabid fan base, like Liga MX likes that, right? That right? It's like it's not that much different than MLS, right? Which wherever you put the rankings, we don't have that, right? Like we don't have that soccer culture in our country. So like you need to be doing things to like get people into the stadium, get them exciting. You need to be obsessed with like creating a great fan experience, not pricing people out, right? Like all these things are and I wish I had the answers. I don't, but like I do know as a fan, those are the things I kind of see, right? And the league needs to probably fix to move forward.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is kind of like your takeaway from it, but Liga MX is kind of a disaster in some ways because
For sure.
they don't allow their best players to leave and go to Europe. They want to keep them. They're overpaying, for their domestic players. They're not getting a chance to go over to Europe and grow, try to develop and be better players. You look at the golden era of the Mexican soccer: Giovanni Dos Santos, Jonathan Dos Santos, Vela, Chicharito, all those players, Ochoa, they were all going to Europe. All of them were. They weren't staying in Liga MX. And was that not arguably the best era of Mexican soccer we had seen? I mean,
Sure.
That's why they've stalled out, because they're not letting their product leave, and you can see the shift, because that's what we're doing now. MLS was so hell bent on keeping all the domestic talent here. Now they're setting it free, selling it, trying to get it in Europe to develop to its final product and hopefully be the best player they possibly can be. Now that's one thing I want to touch on with you about the national team player, the domestic player that is an MLS. The Jordan Morrises, the Christian Roldans, the Matt Miazgas, the Miles Robinsons. We talked about this a little bit last night. Obviously, you would want your best players to test themselves, iron sharpen iron. Hopefully, be in the best form and the best player they can be. Is it possible to have a contributing MLS or a contributing national team player who you look at and say, this guy is good, he deserves to be in the starting 11 if they're playing in MLS?
Yeah, it's possible for sure. I like people who are like absolutists about that. I kind of roll my eyes at and just kind of keep moving, to be honest. I don't even want to argue about it. Like, it's 100% possible, right? And I'll go back to my Brazil example, right? Brazil, obviously as a country is creating some of the best talent in the world. They're sending it to Europe, right? And do they have enough players in Europe to only field a purely European roster? Yes. But they also, if you look, almost every single big tournament, if you look at the roster, they have a couple domestic players. And I'm sure there's some people who go, I want that guy who's playing in Spain over the guy domestically. But they do have some amazing players playing domestically. You have to scale it down for us. We're not there. We're all the way down here. But our stars also aren't where their stars are, right? So it's like everything's scaled down for us for sure. But it's the same thing. We're going to have guys in Europe. But to flip the coin, we also could have a roster full of totally 100% no MLS guys, and that might be the best team to put together, right? To me, where our talent has gone and where it's at right now, if you have more than a couple MLS guys, something's wrong. Either one, your most talented guys aren't pushing themselves. If you really think your most talented guys are in MLS, or maybe not even most talented, best guys to have on this team, to build this team with, if some of them are in MLS, why? Like that would be my question. Why are you still in MLS? If we have a roster of 50 guys playing at pretty high levels of Europe, why aren't you playing, not in the second division in Sweden, but like, why aren't you, if you're good enough for the U.S. national team, you're probably good enough to play, in the Eredivisie, at least at this point in time. That's kind of where we're getting to. Mm-hmm. Question one, right? Like, what's that scenario? And, Miles Robinson's the one example I'll use, right? And I get torched as somebody who is seen as more of a Euro snob. I'm not, but somebody who's seen more on that side, I get torched by that side, right? If we divide USMNT Twitter into two, that side torches me for saying, I still kind of think Miles is in the mix. Miles isn't in the mix. He's the 13th best center back. I'm like, I don't see it, man. Like, I've watched Mark McKenzie a decent amount. Like, he's not better than Miles. Like, I'm sorry. Like, let's just judge talent. Let's not judge league. Let's judge talent. Now, do I prefer Mark McKenzie a little bit over Miles in some areas? Sure. But like, that's the nuance that gets lost, right? Is you can 100% watch players in MLS, and it's a different level of soccer than some guys playing in Europe, but it's not that different than Mark McKenzie. If you're watching Mark McKenzie play, any guys playing in Austria, Belgium, any of these leagues, like, that is not a higher level, guys. Sorry, but it's not. Like I don't understand how you could watch Belgium, right? Austria, right? Not the top team, the whole league, and then watch MLS and say it's better. Like, people do that all the time, So to your point, though, like, it can happen. It's going to be a minority moving forward. It's going to be a young guy who hasn't got his move yet. It's going to be maybe a veteran who comes back to MLS but still has a lot to offer. Somebody who's like a career Europe guy, comes back to MLS at 32, 33, but is still a top 23 U.S. player. Nobody like that right now, in my opinion, but these are things that are going to happen, right? And I think as a fan base, let's not like freak out because there's three MLS guys on the roster if they're competitive and good enough.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And one of the things that I would say about national team players that are in MLS, if you were going to have like a certain position group you'd want MLS, it probably would be defenders, because obviously the national team attackers in MLS are not up to par with the European national team players we have. But Miles Robinson, he's going against Messi. He's going against Hani Mukhtar. He's going against Emil Forsberg. He's going against good players. Like, it's not like he's playing a bunch of washed strikers and,
Right.
midfielders and stuff. Like, he's playing against some good talent in attack. Now, if we obviously an attacker, a striker, we want in Europe because they're not playing any tough defenders in MLS. I mean, it's Swiss cheese over here, right? It's not good. So I think if you were going to pick a position you would want that you could maybe give some lenience to, it would be center back, maybe fullback in MLS that a national team player could get by, still contribute to the national team, and they'd be fine. Now, the next thing I want to ask you and transition to is how can we make MLS better? Because one of the things we talked about of why we want players to leave is because they're not being tested over here. Now, hypothetically, if MLS ever did kind of reach that top 5 league threshold, I'm sure a lot of people would feel different. I mean, if they're playing a top 5 league, it doesn't matter if they're here, it doesn't matter if they're in Europe. They're getting quality minutes against good talent, and you would think they're developing, right? How do we get there, man? I mean, you got all these silly rules that nobody can follow unless you're just an MLS sicko like me. Sadly, I don't like to admit that in public a lot, but it's how are you supposed to get the average fan to give a damn about this league if they can't even follow what's going on?
Yeah, that's my number one thing I wrote down, kind of thinking about some topics for today, and kind of, well, how do we improve this thing? Un-Americanize it, right? You talked about going to the European calendar, right? I'm not going to say any of these ideas. I'm not going to sit here and say this solves it. This one thing solves it. But I think like when the league was built in the mid 90s, it was Americanized, right? We had a different way we did penalty kicks, like just the way the league was structured, salary cap, draft, like all these things that are very American in their nature, right? If you look at how almost every other sport works in all these other countries, professional cricket, professional rugby, professional soccer, like there's these weird kind of arbitrary things that we did, honestly, that our ownership groups did, right? What does the draft do, and what does rookie salary scale do? That helps the owners. Because when Caitlin Clark comes around, right, to use a hot basketball topic right now, you have a salary structure. You don't have to pay her $2 million a year, which she would go for on a free market. You can pay her $70K a year. All good. Like, this is great. Saves me money, gives me a rookie for 3-4 years on a cheap. Like, it's that kind of stuff that still exists in the MLS, right? And you talked about, like, we don't need to get into the asinine and just completely archaic, like, rule structures that are in place. But, like, to me, I would break it all down and un-Americanize it. And I would make it so much of like the hardcore soccer fan base in the US right now. Like, soccer in the US from a purely watching standpoint is hot. Between like just the Hispanic American, audience you have, who like, comes from countries where they're diehard, to I think the hipster, right, generation, right? Like, it's cool to watch European soccer, to like this new generation of fans that are, into the MLS at a younger age. Like, but the main thing is, like, people know how soccer works worldwide now. In 95, they didn't. In the mid 2000s, even they didn't, right? If you told soccer fans in the mid 2000s, hey, just have your supporter shield be your title, people would be like, what are you talking about? No playoff? But for me, I'm like, I want the supporter shield, mainly because the Red Bulls would have 3 titles if that was the case. But like, I want the supporter shield to be the title. Like, it's different, right? It makes you stand out in this. It makes sure you align a little bit more with like the soccer world and what people know if they follow soccer worldwide. Like, would you lose probably a little bit of the American MLS fan base, a little bit? You wouldn't lose them, but would you make them a little angry? Maybe. But, and once again, I'm not saying any of these single ideas are the be all end all, or even to do them. I'm just saying, as a whole, I would look at the whole structure of the league, and I would break it all down, and I would redo it, right? Like, a team like Miami should be able to build a super team if they want to invest enough. They shouldn't be hamstrung. They shouldn't have to be. We shouldn't be like, I don't even know what's going on. You probably know better than I would. Like, are we breaking rules? Are we not? Are we giving them away around? Are we having to pay a guy under the table? Are we having to, like, what are we doing to get everybody there? It's like, listen, somebody came in who's really rich and wants to invest. Cool. Like, cook. Like, to me, teams full of superstars in the MLS is great, right? We have these structures to like build parity, which is like a thing in American sports, right? Like, we need salary caps, and we need luxury tax, and we need all this because we need parity. We need every city to have an equal chance. Like, with soccer, screw it. If you want to build a super team in LA and it'll draw eyes to the league holistically, do it. Cook. go for it. That's my opinion, right? Like
100%.
we shouldn't be like hamstringing these teams that want to invest more with, these rules that are just impossible to get around. Things like, I'm just going to keep spitting here, and I'm going to let you come in on any and all of these. I'm sure you talked about them a lot here, like all of the regional stuff. And you can tell me if some of this stuff is outdated, if we've changed stuff in the last couple of years and I just haven't followed. But like we have like the regional scouting, right? Like players have territorial rights, right? Like that's still a thing.
Homegrown. Yep.
All that. But like even like the area they can draw a guy into their academy from, right? Isn't that like a thing? Like Chris Richards went to Dallas because Bama didn't have one and they could draw from there. But like if I'm Dallas, right, like the way it works in England is I could be a team in Wales and I could be doing scouting in Scotland or Northern England, and there's no limitation on, oh, well, that player's, up near Sheffield, so Sheffield gets that guy. It's that kind of stuff. Is that still the way it's working here?
I'm pretty sure they talked about changing that, like kind of just letting it be a free for all, sign anybody you want in the home, like in the territory. I mean, that's kind of how it should be, honestly,
Yeah,
but
if they change it, excuse me for anybody who knows out there, but like if they have, awesome, that's the kind of thing I want though, right? Like I want us to start to go, okay, cool, we're going to reward people who invest in scouting. And if you go to LA and you pull players out of the Galaxy and LAFC's region and you can get them to Dallas because your academy's awesome and you can give them the best development opportunity and you're willing to pay them more, right? And you're willing to invest more in them, cool, do it. But like I feel like we're being hurt on so many levels by a lot of these kind of Americanized rules, right? I'm sure you designated player and all this stuff is just like, to me, like if I had a magic wand and I was a czar, I'd just be like, I'd wave it and be like, we're done with it all. We're done with all that stuff. We're going to restructure this league. It's not 1995. Let's just go back to the drawing board on a lot of this stuff and build the best league for today.
No, exactly. And I think honestly, Adam, it starts at the top. You have Don Garber, who kind of weathered the storm for this league, and he's seen it at its lowest point, and obviously he's seeing it at its highest point. Now, it's not the highest me and you would per se want it to be. I mean, we're not even close, right? But it is the highest point MLS has ever been in. I mean, they've got Messi, they've got more enthusiasm than they've ever had, just not exactly what we want. I think when you have somebody who has seen it at its worst, it's really hard for them to take that jump because they're always kind of like a little scared. They're afraid to death that possibly something could relapse and the league could possibly fold still. But I think we're way past that. Soccer is not a 50-50 sport anymore in America. I feel like it's all in. Everybody's ready for it. This thing is wide open. Like we are ready. We've been ready, honestly. I remember in 2014, that was probably my favorite World Cup at home because I've seen more people than I've ever seen just enthusiastic, excited, supporting the national team, fired up. I mean, it was an amazing sight, man. It was insane. That was the first time I really realized and thought to myself, man, this thing could be special. This could be something big here in the States. And yeah, like the rules, man, the MLS purposely creates these barriers that nobody's asking for. And they always talk about, yeah, we have to do this. Like, no, you don't. No one's asking for that. The great thing about soccer is there is so much talent in the world. You don't have to have a $200 million payroll to have a good team. You could have a $30 million payroll and have a decent team. There are plenty of clubs and leagues around the world. I mean, do you honestly think we talked about Brazil. I don't think Brazil's not paying 40 or 50 million a year for their salary cap or their payroll in most of their clubs that are decent.
I don't think so.
No, I'm pretty. That's the main reason a lot of these young kids want to leave so they can get paid in Europe. Like they're going to have a big payday. I mean, the Eredivisie we talked about. Now, Ajax obviously and PSV, they're spending a little more than the average team than the Eredivisie, but like they're not. Ajax isn't spending EPL numbers. They're probably spending. I think I actually looked at it. They're only spending like maybe 40-50 million a year on their whole entire salary, which if you did that in MLS, I mean, my God, look at the jump we would have. I mean, I think the average team in Major League Soccer is spending around $8 to $10 million a year in salary, but it's divvied up weird. It's weird. Like, the DPs kind of like completely, throw that number off. It's not, it's not, it's skewed. Yeah. They're not balanced at all. I mean, Messi alone is making like 50 million a year. Imagine if you could take that 50. Now, obviously it's Messi. You're not going to pass up on that. But if a club is able to spend 50 million a year, Imagine what they could do if they could spend that 50 million throughout their entire roster. Now we're talking a whole different league, aren't we? We're talking something completely different. And you talked about Messi in Miami, like, investors, people willing to spend, right? I don't think there's a single person who's fair minded would think if Inter Miami could spend with no restrictions, they would probably be a top 30 club in the world because of the people they would be able to attract and the people that want to come play with Messi that can't come play with Messi because of the financial limitations.
Right.
So this thing is ready, man. It is. That's why so many fans get so frustrated because we all see it. The league is taking baby steps. LAFC, the LA Galaxy, huge potential. Your Red Bulls in New York City, that's going to be an insane rivalry when if it's able to reach its full potential, because now there's actually going to be a team in New York City with their own stadium, not playing in a baseball.
Cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's world class, man. Like, that fires me up. Like, saying you have a soccer club in New York City, the five boroughs with their own soccer specific stadium is literally a unicorn. Not even the Giants and Jets have a stadium in New York City. So that fires me up. That makes me think, oh my God, who's going to want to come to play in New York City now and actually be in the five boroughs? Like, that is elite potential, gets me fired up. There are other markets like that. Chicago's totally whiffed. They're playing at Soldier Field. They're not spending any money. They got Shaqiri, who's been a total bust for the team. Huge disappointment. Why haven't they signed a Lewandowski? Think about what that would do for that market. It feels like MLS is not Major League Soccer. It's Major League missed opportunities, man. Like, they just can't. It's like they can't see the obvious when everyone else can see it.
Yeah, and it's, I feel like stuff like this just takes people a while, right? Like, changing rules is hard. Changing rules in business, changing rules in, schools, changing, like, people don't want to change, like, people, this is how it's done. It's the most common thing. Well, this is just how we do it. Well, why do you do it that way? Right? Do you see that there might be opportunity if you did it a little different? And I want to give MLS, a lot of kudos, right? Like, I talked about the academy stuff at the beginning. I think just culturally in the league, and there was no mandate, right? Stuff like this happens organically when it's like, hey, did you see what FC Dallas sold that guy for? Like, yeah, damn. What? Like, can we have a meeting tomorrow about our academy, right? For any club that like had a crappy academy, like, out of that 2-3 year run where FC Dallas is selling all those guys, ownership's like, hey guys, let's reconvene here. What do we need to do? How do we invest in this academy more? How do I get guys in that I can go sell for 10 million? How do we, and like, it's organic. Nobody said, hey, everybody in the league, let's do developmental academies, right? It's like, it happened, in a couple places, and all of a sudden everybody wants to do it, has to do it to stay competitive. I think that organic growth is, like, to me, the biggest kudos I can give the league. It's like, okay, we are growing players and we're giving them chances, right? Because you're seeing that at a way higher rate too, right? People are just playing 20-year-olds or playing 21-year-olds. Now, it's self-motivated. They want to give them exposure so they can sell them for sure, but who cares? Like, what it's done is it's created excitement. I think people, especially in the United States, like to see young players, young prospects play. I think that's an exciting thing. And then there's benefit to the club, right? And so, like, what are those other opportunities like that, and how that organic growth has happened with the academies and playing young players and selling young players, right? What are some other opportunities? Well, I think you mentioned one, right? It's like, we're the United States. We have Miami and New York and LA and some big cities that you better believe that big stars in Europe would be, not all, but a lot, would be really excited to expand their brand, right? You hit 33 in Europe, your brand is maxed out. Like, you're not growing your brand in Spain and Europe and South America. Like, they know who you are if you're a big star. But if you're Lionel Messi, like, you're known in the US, but you could take it all to another level by coming and being a star. Like, that's a thing. We're not making that up, right? Like, we've seen it through the years. Stars believe in that. That is the next frontier, right? And you're hearing the crazy names we've heard over the last 3 years. Hey, I'm interested in going to the US at the end of my career, right? And like you talked about Lewandowski, I feel like there are dozens of guys kind of lined up and ready for the opportunity. The question is, they're going to expect a certain level of pay. Can we pay enough? Like, are we closing the door on some really good players that could, like, help build the brand of our league because of these archaic rules, right? And so the way that the organic growth happened in the academies, I couldn't tell you like how it all started, but like we need to make sure right now, like the league needs to go, okay, this is cool. Look what's happening with Messi. Look what's happening with all the guys that want to come to Miami. Are we set up to allow that to happen in city A, B, C, D, and E? Because all of a sudden, if 10 years down the road, I know Messi's done by then, but like 10 years down the road, your league is like some really young, exciting guys, right? US kind of academy kind of guys, right? Dual nat Mexican American. Like there's a lot of really exciting guys. A lot of second tier kind of 20 to 30s. Like I don't think we're going to get, not in the near term, I don't think we're going to get stars in their prime. But we're going to get really good kind of second tier guys, right? Guys who could maybe go play for low level Eredivisie team, championship level team, and then 30 plus superstars who are still really good, big names. To me, that sounds pretty darn exciting, man. If you had like 10 teams in the league, I know it's not going to be everyone, 10 teams in the league that were kind of built with this blend of players that we're just talking about, man, like that sounds cool.
No, that's exciting. And I always think about like 10 years ago, we talk about like the 2014 World Cup. What was the typical player that MLS was signing at that time? What was a designated player considered, like, the quality wise? Like I remember San Jose signed a guy named Matias Perez Garcia, kind of like a journeyman in the Argentinian league, not very good. I mean, decent for MLS at the time. And then I look at like the young player we're signing now, or that's coming to MLS. I mean, for Federico Redondo, obviously his dad is a legend at Madrid. That guy would have never. Now, obviously, he's got the Messi pull, but that guy would have never came close to MLS at 20 years old. 10 years ago. No way. There's no chance at all. I don't care how much you're paying him. He would say that would be career suicide to come over here at that age, you know? So you just look at the players that like the player pool that's expanded of who will come to MLS, and it's only going to get better, right? I mean, if the league improves, the money is better, it's only going to get better. And I guess that's another frustrating thing from MLS, like my perspective as a fan of the league, is like they don't see that and they have to be prepared. And like you said, you can't just, pull the rug under someone. You can't just like, polar opposite changes one night from the next. It's got to be kind of like a slow pace, just so that way it's like a smooth transition. But they're not doing anything right now, honestly. This is very underwhelming what they've done. They haven't added anything. They're just, I don't even want to bore you with I don't know if you've seen their most recent changes they made, that they're going to implement this summer, but it's just kind of, it's nonsensical. Like, they have 3 DPs per club, and they introduced this new rule of U22s, which is essentially another DP. You just can't be over 22 years old, right? Like originally, you couldn't use all 3 U22s unless you had unless your third DP was a young DP. So like, what I'm saying, like all those hurdles and stuff that makes no sense. It's mental jumping jacks. Why not just simplify it and say, yes, you get 3 DPs, you get 3 U22s. Why does it have to be this and that to use this? It's just overcomplicated. And that's the thing that I think like perfectly exemplifies what MLS does that is so frustrating, and where they're trying to where they complicate everything to where people can't follow and they just lose interest.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's so good. And I wanted to kind of backtrack again, I think, to the un-Americanize it, right? Which is kind of what I've said for a long time. I don't want to open a total can of worms. I'm sure we could have a whole other hour podcast on this, right? But like, once again, when this league was started, it was Americanized. Franchise fees, right? Like, I get the complication behind ProRel. I get it. It's very hard once you build a league where people have invested money into these clubs with one expectation to set a different expectation. But I think that, once again, it's not American. There's a lot of people who are against it because it's not American. It's not what we do. But like, to me, it would be a total game changer, right? If I've taken my kids over to, the Hartford Athletic games that are over here, probably an hour 15 from our house, gone to a couple of those, cheaper, closer to home, right? USL is awesome. Like, it would be a totally different ball game in Hartford if there was a path to like, a top league in this country. It would be a totally different ball game. the excitement level would be raised, the investment level would be raised, right? And so once again, I get the complication because now all of a sudden 2 or 3 people who paid premium dollar for their franchises, right, all of a sudden might be going down to a second tier. But can you think about like the investment that Hartford Athletic would put into their academy and into their like, and I get like Lou FC is doing it, right? Like without that path, but like, and can you think of the level of investment that for a third tier club, right? And for a fourth tier club, like the investment in all these little small cities across the country would just be different. And yes, you might lose some of like the top tier investment, but I think you're going to make up for it in the fact that like people at all these second tier clubs are going to be really excited. And like, I don't think that's not a legitimate argument, right? I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's happening with the league structure. I don't think it's 5 years away. Maybe it's going to happen somewhere deep down the road, but I think it's worthwhile in this argument to just put that out there because I didn't mention it when I said un-Americanize it, because like people, and to me, it will be a differentiating factor, right? Pro rel is cool, man. Like when you really learn about what it is, it's freaking awesome. Like the
Oh, it
college,
is.
I don't know if you follow like the college realignment stuff at all, but there's like kind of like a proposal out there for the college football to create, a one league to rule them all with promotion relegation to the second league. Freaking cool, man. Like you're telling me that the bowl game to go up or down, to go up and down. So those bowl games in the second tier, I'm watching them. I might not have watched second tier college football all year. I'm watching that bowl game though. Really cool. Am I watching the bowl game for who stays up? Yeah, I'm watching the bowl game for who stays up. And that's like once you get into European soccer and start following that stuff, like that, those are my favorite games all year. The Pro Rel Championship games, like they're just crazy. I don't need to know one player to be into the game because the stakes are so high. So once again, I don't know. I'm sure we could probably throw a bunch of ideas out there, but like, you have to differentiate yourself in our market. Being a niche sport, doing what every other league's doing in this market, to me, doesn't differentiate you. It doesn't make you any different, right? So, yeah.
I think the most realistic outcome, we're never going to get a full-fledged pro rel system, at least in the short 10 20 years. I just think it's not going to happen because you see $400-500 million expansion fees. It's just
That's
not
right.
going to happen, right?
Correct.
I think if we're being realistic, we could possibly see a hybrid pro rel system where we maybe get to 40 teams and then we break it into MLS 1, MLS 2, and that's what we would do. That is honestly so much better. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and isn't it just weird, Adam, that there is a club, 2 teams in MLS, right? They're not in different divisions or anything like that, could go 3 or 4 years without playing each other, and then to
Yeah,
call
it's real
yourself the best team in the league and you haven't even played everybody, how does that make any sense? Because your Red Bulls actually played LAFC for the first time since 2020 or 2021. Yeah,
Yeah, I saw that.
that's insane. Like that's ridiculous. And so when you get to 20 teams, everybody can play each other 2 times. Which is how it should be. You cannot crown yourself the best team in the league if you've not played every team. You just can't. How can you say that when you haven't beat every club? And also, too, I think back in the day it was a little harder with MLS had 20 teams. And we only got 20 teams for like literally 1 or 2 years, and then bam, there's 4 more teams right there. There was some logistical issues. Obviously, traveling was harder back then because these clubs were cheaper. They're having to take charter flights, or they're not taking charter flights. They're taking connecting flights and stuff, and it's just a total mess. Professional football players, it's just crazy that they're doing that, right? It's a bush league stuff. But things are different now. We got billionaires who could have their own plane. I don't know if you know this, but it's actually in the CBA that you're not allowed to use your own private plane. There are several teams that have them, but you're not allowed to do it because some clubs don't have their own private jets to be able to take their players. So they have to do commercial flights still, which is crazy when you think about it, right? But it's just small things like that. You can get across the country easily now. They have the money to do it. Make it 20 teams. And this is my biggest thing. This is the biggest thing to me is that when you have a team that has consistently been mediocre, how are they being punished in MLS? There's no punishment for being bad. They're not being fined.
Right.
They're not being relegated.
Right.
So this scenario would actually have some type of repercussions for bad play. Like some teams, like the Revolution right now, the closest club to you, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe one of the New York teams are actually is the Revolution the closest club to you?
Pretty equal. Both are like 2.5, something like that.
Yeah, they're the worst team in MLS. Maybe San Jose. what's going to happen to them this year when they're bad? They're not going to fire their coach.
Nothing.
Nothing's going to happen to them. So it's like it honestly promotes mediocrity by not doing anything. It's like, hey, it's cool with us, hey, it's all right. And the worst
Well,
part is 18 of 29 teams make the playoffs. 18 of
right.
29.
Right. Why? And it's, once again, it's Americanized, right? It's like regular season doesn't really matter. You see that in basketball, you see it in baseball, you see all these sports, like regular season just doesn't matter quite as much. Like, it's not like totally devalued, but it's like, gosh, like 16 teams, 20 teams made the playoffs in the NBA this year out of 30. If you count the play-in, right? Like they don't play in games. So you had a chance, like if you should be in the top 20 out of 30, it's like, yeah, like the Miami Heat were in the play-in last year and went to the finals. Like, all right, if you're good enough, chill and then turn it on. It's just not good for that product, like your point about two MLSs is interesting. I haven't really thought about that, but I think that I do think that once you open up a gateway, like sports are really cool when you open up gateways for anyone, and I like it's a pretty cool thing. It's where you get the underdog story. Underdog captures our imagination, right? That's why March Madness is so big, right? It's massive because of betting, yes, but also like that first weekend and the underdogs. That's it. Like people want to see Cinderella, people want to see the game winner. And as soon as you open those kind of stories up, I don't think American sports fans understand even what that really is when it comes to like professional sports underdogs, right? We call professional sports underdogs like the team in San Antonio who, maximized their salary cap, and not like the team in Hartford who invested and, rose up to become the best team in MLS. So yeah, like you said, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because the way the league's built, the owners own the league, right? That's just how American sports leagues are. Like the owners basically run the league, right? They have to vote on everything. That ownership group's not going to come in and vote and be like, yeah, I vote that we all open up the chance that we all move down a league. Like, no way. It's not happening. So I agree, totally unrealistic, but I always think it's a worthwhile conversation when we're talking about changes that would actually help the soccer landscape, because I think it is one that would help the league. But yeah, man, there's been a lot of growth, and sometimes I feel like really negative when I start getting into the things that still need to happen. But I think like when you love something, which I think is what I hear out of you, when you love something, you wish for it to be even better, right? And you wish for it to fix the things. It's like when you like a team that's not achieving and you start complaining about it, it doesn't mean you're not a fan. It means like, I love this team, man, and this team is being run poorly. We're drafting poorly and we're signing the wrong people and our coaching stinks. Like, it can get redundant, but that's kind of where I think a lot of people are with MLS, because I think a lot of people that are seen as MLS haters actually aren't. They're actually would be really passionate MLS supporters, and they want it. They want to be MLS supporters and they want to back the league, but they, want to see some changes to kind of help it get to a place where it can get.
100%, man, 100%. And, one of the last things I want to talk to you about is that FIFA recently ruled that they're going to allow other leagues to play, internationally, regular season matches. So we all know maybe China would be close, but we all know that the floodgates are going to open. There's going to be several leagues coming to the United States and playing regular season matches here in the U.S. Is that going to put the pressure on Major League Soccer to finally wake up and do something? Because if the Premier League is playing regular season matches every year over here, or La Liga, people are going to say, well, I have the best product in my own backyard now. Why do I even need Major League Soccer anymore? They're actually playing here. Now, that was the one thing that you can make the argument is they're not even here. Now they are. They're playing here in the United States.
Yeah, to me, it kind of depends on how much, right? Which is it going to be kind of like the NFL going to London, where it's like 3 or 4 games a year and it's kind of a novelty? If it's that, I don't want to say it's not going to be any sort of instigator, but I don't think there's going to be quite enough financial impact, right? If it's 4 games, and they're played in, let's say, one in California, one in New York, one in Texas, whatever, one in Chicago, I don't know, one in Florida, different markets, right? It's not going to pull enough away from those local MLS teams for their fans to go to one EPL game. But if you start to stack it where it's like, hey, it's, 10 EPL games and it's 10 La Liga games and it's 8 Bundesliga games, now all of a sudden, like you start talking 20, 30, 40 games, right? You start talking 3, 4 games per big market. Now all of a sudden it could hurt. It could really hurt the bank accounts. It could actually pull tickets away. The thing I'm most excited about, right, is I think that it'll be an event. I think it'll be an event that people go to. I think that a lot of people who are halfway into soccer, kind of where I was, maybe 15 years ago in terms of European soccer, late 2000s. I knew a little bit about it, followed it a little bit, played some FIFA, but couldn't really tell you that much. All of a sudden, like there's pathways into all these sports. You go to one big event, it's really fun. You start looking into it more. You start going, man, let me follow that more. Like everybody starts somewhere. So to me, all of these are potential entryways into soccer fandom. Because if you can go watch, I don't know what the matchups will be, but if you can go watch two really high level teams play and you're a young kid kind of into soccer, you might be a lifelong fan after that, right? That might be what sparks your interest to be a lifelong fan. So it's an exciting opportunity. I think it's stupid by those leagues personally. I don't know why we're going to play like Man United versus Tottenham here. Like, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But as a U.S. fan and a U.S. person, I'm happy about it. Like, sure, bring it over. Like, it helps us.
It's all about the money, man. I can't even imagine what the ticket prices are going to be for the first ever regular season EPL match in the United States. I mean, that's history. That is history. It's going to be a lot of money. I'm even scared that's going to probably blow the Messi tickets out of the water. You know,
For sure.
so I mean, it's all about the money, though, right? It's all about the money. And one of these conversations I had with my friend recently is I truly believe, with our media market and how much like we're able to advertise and promote things. If we had the Premier League in the United States, like say you were able to move all of the history and all the clubs into the United States, right? I think it could possibly be even bigger because the way we're able to amplify things and how we're able to sell things. I mean, that's what I believe. I mean, obviously, it would hurt because a lot of the European people wouldn't be able to watch the matches anymore. Obviously, but this is all hypothetical pulling it. But my point is that if we had the equal quality league like that, it would sell like hotcakes. I mean, it would be insane here. People are starving for it. That's why they're bringing it here. They're bringing it here for the money. They know people are desperate to watch it. People are waking up every morning on Sundays to watch the Premier League here, and they've been doing it for over a decade now, right? So
Yeah,
I mean,
it's to my point. That little kid who goes to that game and is a lifelong fan, cha-ching. How many jerseys is he going to buy? How many? That's another lifelong viewer for your TV contracts. Like, no, it makes financially it makes sense, right? When I say like I don't get it, like if I was a fan over there, I'd be like, huh.
I'd be pissed. I'd be pissed, man.
Although it probably helps your league, right? The reason the EPL's gotten so big and is so good is because they tapped into the American market early, right? And they've done a good job promoting themselves worldwide as the best league. And that's driven up the, amount of money they can charge for their TV contracts in all these different countries. And that's why there's so much money, right? There's not magically more money. They've done a really good job of marketing themselves, right? And this kind of play, it's a marketing play, right? It's a marketing play to get yourself into the households of Americans in a way that maybe you wouldn't be, before this. So yeah.
Yeah, well, and it'll be interesting to see how that turns out, what kind of level of interest there'll be after it does it maybe a couple years. Obviously, we see the interest in the summertime when they come play friendlies over here. Stadium's always packed out. Merchandise frenzy, right? People are buying stuff left and right. So hopefully this helps push MLS in the right direction and they see what Premier League teams are doing over here and they're like, hey, we want to be able to do that. We want a piece of that pie. We see the fans are ready. Let's try to bring them in.
Right.
So,
Right.
so I'm excited, man, and I can't wait to see what the league has entail, and hopefully it reaches what we think it can be. I'm still skeptical, obviously. MLS has just let me down so many times, even though I am trying to help promote it as much as I can. I've officially entered a believe it when I see it phase of the league. So yeah,
the best is ahead though, right? Like it is and we've seen growth. If you did this podcast 10 years ago, things would be way more dire. And if you did 20 years ago, it would be drastically. So there's growth. And I think sometimes growth doesn't happen at the speed we as fans want it to, right? But it is happening. And I think the league will get to a point where, it's not going to be a top 5 league. It's just hard. There's top 5 league at this point is so dictated by Champions League access. It just is like there's so much money in those Champions League spots. It's like really hard without that. But can we get to a point where we are like a legitimate top end player outside of the top 5 leagues? I think we can. Like, to me, that's the goal, right? It's like build a league that, like, you got your, your top, especially top 4, right? And then what's next? Okay, France is kind of at the top of that list. Portugal is at the top of that list, right? Eredivisie is probably somewhere in that mix. MLS is somewhere down there. Like, can you get yourself up to that kind of like, I don't know, high AAA, and if we're thinking about it like that, I think the league can, and I think it's going that way. I do think they have to make some wholesale changes, or else it's going to stunt that development. I think you brought up a lot of good ones. We brought up a lot of good ones in this hour-long pod that we just did. Like, if you can do some things tactically, you can open the door for it to happen far quicker, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just going to be a matter if they're willing to do it, how fast they're able to do it. Most important soccer year in our country's history in 2026. That would be the time to take the launch pad forward and try to propel this league into the right direction and where it could be. So yeah, man, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I thought we talked about a lot of interesting things, and hopefully they can implement these things and we get better product and everybody wins, right?
That's right, man.
So I appreciate it, Adam. Make sure you follow Adam at Stan USMNT on Twitter. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Will.
Hopefully we'll do it again.
Let's do it.
Also, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell notification so you never miss a video. And until next time, I will see you all soon.